Hey man, how's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
It's been a good day so far. The sun's out. I think the weather's finally starting to turn a little bit, so which is a good thing. We might actually have spring, and then maybe eventually summer. So who knows?
Or spring will be skipped altogether, and it just goes from like winter, maybe like 2 days of spring, and then summer. That goes sometimes.
That's kind of my fear right now. Like I told you before, we have a sectional track meet coming up on Saturday, and yeah, it's just totally planning for like whatever 50 degrees and rainy, and now I heard it might be like 80, 85, possibly 90 degrees and a little bit of rain too. But what's a track meet without a little bit of rain and horrible weather?
Yeah,
so
some elements here,
right? So yeah, I always say welcome, which is funny because like it's not like you're a guest. We're on here together every month or whatever. But welcome to everyone else joining us and hopping on today. We have a great conversation prepared for you. I know Corey's especially excited about this one because he's done a number of lectures or presentations on some of these topics too. So if you guys haven't seen Corey, he is on kind of like a speaking circuit. You might see him at different conferences. Do you have one coming up actually?
Yes, the NSCA National. So
there you go.
Be presenting on a supplement topic. It won't be like a review like what we're going to do today. It'll be on how to assess supplement quality.
Okay.
So today we're talking about like what are certain supplements, what do they do. At my talk at the NSCA National is going to be more about how do you read a label, what are things you can look for to try to tell if it's quality, if it's safe, things like that. So yes, right. NSCA, I'm the last presenter of the first day, so try to bring energy if your like eyes are glazed over by the end of the day. So yeah, I definitely would love anyone who's gonna watching this, or if you're able to see this before the conference, come to my talk or come to see me at the HK booth, and we can talk shop, and you can see what new books we've got and all that good stuff.
Right.
So
there you go. Yeah, a little plug for Corey and his upcoming presentation. But I do think there is some importance to that in, I guess, the relevancy of what we're talking about today. And you do have experience talking on this specific topic here. So if you guys missed it for some reason, we are going to talk about supplements today. We're just going to touch on a few. I think we have 4 or 5 supplements that we're going to hit on specifically. Yeah. And the reason for that is that we would rather, cover some of the most popular ones that we think people use a lot or that are most effective, and go a little more in depth on that as opposed to covering a broad range of supplements in general and not getting as in depth. But so I did want to put out a little disclaimer, like some supplements work for some people. They don't always work the same for everyone, so just a disclaimer there. Be careful what you're getting in your supplements, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It sounds like Corey's going to talk even more about that in his NSCA presentation. So a couple of facts just to get started here that I found that I thought was really interesting. I did a similar, I guess, presentation a little while back on supplements. Maybe on a smaller scale, but I was interested to find that the supplement industry is a business. It's a business or a part of the industry estimated to be worth about $8 billion. So that gives you kind of an idea of a lot of people do use supplements. A lot of people do rely on supplements. And I know that's expected to increase, I think, to about $11 billion by 2028. So the supplement industry isn't slowing down. We just want to give you guys a better idea of what to look for, what supplements to trust, maybe some of the more reliable ones that you can kind of lean on if you're looking in that direction. Now, I guess we can go ahead and jump in. One of the first ones that I felt like we had to mention is protein. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is a little personal anecdote, when I was trying to build up my training business, of course, you're looking for ways to supplement your income. A lot of trainers can probably relate to that. So I did work at a supplement store for a supplement company, and we sold everything from like multivitamins, creatine, sleep support, energy support, supplements specifically for women's health, for men's health. But more often than not, when people walk through that door, the first thing that they were asking about was protein. And that's why the main reason why I think it's probably one of the most popular ones that people look for, maybe especially for people that are like new to kind of their own fitness journey. They look at protein as a supplement that they have to have, and that's going to be crucial to their development and their progress. I don't know exactly what your feelings are on this. I think that protein can be an excellent supplement, but I also think that you should still look for protein sources in your natural diet. If you don't feel like you're getting enough protein daily, then this is where you can kind of lean on protein as a supplement. Now, when we were kind of discussing, Corey, like some of the things that we wanted to talk about today, something that you brought up was really interesting, and that people might not be familiar or know exactly what protein is as a supplement. So can you kind of talk about that a little bit and kind of explain to everyone what exactly they're getting in a protein supplement?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll actually chime in on the ubiquitousness, I guess, of protein supplementation. It's the first supplement I ever took,
right?
And it's just a starter. It's like where everyone kind of goes to classically. It's just so synonymous with supplementation. Like it's like just one of the first things, and I think that is the case is because it's so tied uniquely to like muscle building,
right?
As this like very, very special thing that will help you build muscle. And because of that, and it's like, the fact that the supplement companies are really good marketers, that's just where people will start. So the biggest thing I found, or one of the kind of crazier things I found, is that when a lot of people take protein supplements, they're not exactly sure what it is they're taking.
Right.
Obviously, the most popular protein supplement is going to be whey protein. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know that this is derived from milk. Like whey protein is a protein fraction of milk. And whey is really a byproduct of the cheese making industry. So when cheese is made, there's this kind of like byproduct of whey protein that historically it was just kind of thrown away. It was just seen as garbage. And then they found out it was really high in these things called branched chain amino acids, heard of. And then the supplement industry kind of got wind of that. They thought, okay, things could help build muscle. And they developed this process to essentially powderize and concentrate that over from cheese making. So that's what like protein powder is. It's the powderized protein fraction of the original food source. Mm-hmm. Whey protein or casein, that's milk. Right. If it's soy protein, it's soybeans. If it's brown rice, it's brown rice. They just have found a way to extract and isolate the protein portion of that food and then powderize it and there's multiple different ways they can do that, but that's all it is. And so is there anything unique or special about it? Not necessarily. It's just a very concentrated dose. If you drink an 8-ounce glass of milk, that's going to have 8 grams of protein. 20% whey, 20% or 80% casein. Now, if you take 1 scoop, which is usually 30 grams of whey protein, that's going to have somewhere between 25 to 28 grams of protein. Mm-hmm. So just for like this little bit of powder, you now have way more protein than if you drank the milk, which comes with other things like fat and carbohydrates. So it's just a version. And as you mentioned, it's convenience. That's how I view protein. It's a convenient supplement. It helps you meet your needs. If you were to add protein supplementation in and you're not meeting your protein requirements totally from the diet, it's not really going to matter. It's not going to, your body doesn't know like, oh, this is a protein supplement, so, I'm going to build muscle more efficiently. it just sees it as protein coming in. It sees it as amino acids. So if you're not meeting your needs, adding protein on top of that isn't really going to help much. So I see it as, yeah, it's convenience. It's helping you meet your need if you're coming up short, but inherently nothing super special or unique about it as opposed to getting it from food.
Yeah, I remember when I was first getting into lifting and the idea of using any type of supplement. It's kind of funny. I thought of the nursery rhyme. When I heard of whey protein, I thought of the nursery rhyme.
Yes.
Like, little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet eating her curds and whey, and I thought, is she a bodybuilder? Like, what's going on? Why is she eating whey?
Oh, like
yeah, right. Just had a bowl of whey that she was eating, and I mean, probably for, like a lot of people, like at the time, like I didn't know what whey was. Like I was just learning about things, and so yeah, I thought that was hilarious that little Miss Muffet was eating whey.
Yeah, so really interesting anecdote. In grad school, I make my own yogurt because I was weird at that. And if you make your own yogurt at home, and at the end of the process, there will be this little liquid layer on the top.
Okay,
that's the whey layer.
Ah, okay.
Making that liquid would be just like discarded, but then they found out how to powderize it.
Okay.
So weird.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I do want to touch on different kinds of protein powders that you can get. Because you mentioned casein, and I think for a lot of people that might not be familiar, casein is going to be a slower digesting protein. So you might have heard people, maybe taking that before they go to bed because it's going to be most beneficial, like during a time of fasting, because it is so slow to being digested and being absorbed into your system. So a lot of people will tend to take that at night. I guess to our nursery rhyme example, I've heard a lot of people will eat cottage cheese right before they go to bed and get some protein that way. So casein would be a good one for, a little slower digesting if you want to take that more in the evening. Like Corey mentioned, whey is probably the most popular form of protein supplement. What I found is that in the post-processing process, I guess, you're left to less than 90% of the actual protein by the time it's processed and everything, and that's in whey. If you want to go to whey protein isolate, that's a little more refined. It's going to blend a little better, and you're going to have, closer to that 90%, I guess, purity, if you want to say that. You can go a step further and get whey protein hydrolysate, and that is supposed to be, the most refined and the most easily digested protein that you can get. Now, I've heard there are some conflicting studies on exactly what that process is like and exactly, I guess, the protein content that you're going to get from that. And again, that's based on the research. You might have your own experiences with it. Like I said, everyone's going to respond to all of these a little differently. So, sometimes that's the best way to go, is just to kind of try and see what works best for you. As far as protein dosage, I've always heard, about 1 gram per pound of body weight, or you could go about one gram. I think I heard 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. I know if anyone heard my author talk with Jim Stepani, he is really set on that 1 pound or 1 gram per pound of body weight. That seems to work for a lot of people. I don't know what your experiences have been with that as far as dosage.
It's just the most common recommendation.
Yeah.
The most common recommendation is somewhere between 1.6 grams per or 2.2,
right.
So 1 gram per. That's just higher. They already have 0.8 grams per kg for the purpose of muscle building, performance, lean mass gain, fat loss is pretty much universally accepted as too low. So in almost every case, most people recommend getting up to at least that 1.6 grams per kilogram.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. This also depends on your activity level, what your specific goals are. If you're a high level athlete, you're probably going to want more calories overall. You're probably going to want more protein, again, depending on what your specific goals are. I go much more in depth on protein and a number of other topics in my sports and exercise nutrition, learning with human kinetics. So I would encourage everyone to, kind of go to that. It's on YouTube. You might still be able to find it on the Instagram page. But yeah, sports and exercise nutrition, learning with human kinetics. I go into much more detail on that. So because I have the information there, we do want to keep going along so we can hit some of these other topics. And I think one of the most universal supplements that's used by a lot of people is going to be caffeine. And the reason I say that is people use it for exercise or sport performance. Some people use it just to feel more alert in the morning when they wake up. So it is considered a drug by standards, and I think that's also why it's considered the most widely used drug in the world. I think so first of all, everyone's probably familiar with caffeine. I mean, you can get that in, like a pre-workout, an energy drink, coffee. I know Corey gives me a hard time for drinking green tea because compared to some of the other sources, you don't get quite as much caffeine in green tea, but it works for me, so I'm fine with it. But I think it's important for people to kind of understand exactly how caffeine works in the body, and maybe that'll help kind of choose your caffeine timing or your caffeine source that you're looking for. A lot of people think that you drink or intake caffeine and it immediately gives you an energy boost. I think that's true to an extent. You're probably going to feel that boost within 30 to 45 minutes or so. But in Corey, you might be able to add a little bit to this too, but what it actually does is your body has this thing called adenosine, and it's going to alert your body that you need sleep, or that your body's going to need sleep soon. It's going to lower your heart rate. It's going to lower your blood pressure. Think about what caffeine does. It actually does the opposite of all of those. So when your body consumes enough caffeine, it's actually going to block adenosine from doing its job. Now, those are really simple terms. I know there are probably people watching right now saying, hey, you can go much more in depth, but just to keep it simple, I mean, essentially caffeine is going to block adenosine from doing its job, and that's why you're going to feel a little more alert in that way.
Yeah, that's really the main accepted mechanism for caffeine and why it exerts as it affects as an adenosine receptor antagonist.
Yeah,
and it's also why you might build up tolerance, is because anytime we block a receptor, there's an adaptation of just your body creating more receptors.
Right.
So a dose that you used to take is not effective anymore because the adaptation in the central nervous system is to just, well, this isn't working, so I'm going to just make more receptors.
Right.
Then the crash is attributed to the fact that now you've got more receptors available. Well, when the caffeine molecule is gone out of that receptor, now you have a flood of adenosine coming in, and that's the tired feeling you get. So, and then the other thing about caffeine, as far as performance is concerned, that'll make you feel more alert, more awake. But the performance, as far as I understand, and you can chime in here too, it's related to its effect on like decreasing pain sensation.
Right.
So reps, you're going to be able to go harder for longer. And because of that's where we're really exerting, performance. There's kind of some older mechanisms like increasing free fatty acid release or increasing adrenaline, especially on the endurance end of things, like really long endurance events. But as far as I've seen now, it's all really kind of shifted towards adenosine receptor antagonism and decreases in perception of pain.
Right. In reference to the sports performance, some of the research that I've read, and maybe some anecdotal experience too, say you are, I guess in terms of how it's going to affect your performance, say you are, a sprinter getting ready to compete in a track meet, and you take in some caffeine, you drink some caffeine, whatever source you're going for, it might help you in that first sprint event, but it's eventually going to wear off. And if you have, another sprint that you have to do later in the meet, it's probably not going to have that same effect unless, of course, you drink more caffeine, relative to the timing that you're going to do that next event. So there is some conflicting research. This, like you can you can't take evidence from one research study and say that, that works for everyone, that works for everything. You kind of have to take everything, I guess, together as a collective. But, there, like you said, there is evidence that it does help more with maybe endurance athletes as opposed to powerlifters. I think where it might help with those short bursts, or maybe you're going in for like a weightlifting session, something like that, is that it is going to kind of spark your central nervous system. So I think you will get an effect from that, if you're going in for a lifting session. Yeah, kind of opposite of what I had always thought, actually, in reading the research. It doesn't affect, those, short training sessions as much as maybe we thought that it might. But again, there's tons of research that you can probably look up and read on that. Some things that I found interesting were the, I guess, acceptable doses of caffeine for people. And again, this is going to be a little different for everyone. Like you said, I mean, some people might build up a tolerance to caffeine, so maybe they can tolerate a little bit more. But in general, it's suggested that you can take about 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, for kind of a low dose, all the way up to, 5 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight for like a moderate to high dose of caffeine. And when I kind of did the math, that kind of surprised me that those were acceptable doses, because, I mean, if you break that down, that's about 250 milligrams of caffeine on the low end, all the way up to, 420 to 500 milligrams for like a 185-pound person, for example. So I always thought, or I'd always heard, before I started studying this a lot more, that you wanted to keep your caffeine really low, but now like up to 400 milligrams per day is considered acceptable.
Yep. Yeah, 3 to 6 milligrams per kg is by far the most common recommendation.
Yeah.
I want to say not the most recent dietary guidelines, but the one before that,
okay,
kind of dropped well, with the added is that, like you said, the up to 3 to 4 cups of coffee per day, which is 100 milligrams of caffeine, is pretty much regarded as safe. The highest I've ever seen in research is 9 milligrams per kilogram of caffeine, and like that's a lot. And if you get to 6 milligrams per kg, and you're not feeling it for whatever reason, if you're a non-responder, because we know there are different rates at which people metabolize caffeine. Sorry, you're just one of those poor souls that doesn't respond. But I would not recommend going to 9 milligrams per kg, because if I remember right, in that study, I mean, like the incidence of adverse events, meaning like, increasing heart rate, feelings, was pretty high. It makes sense. Like that's a very, very high dose. So yeah, milligrams per kilogram is the most recommended dosage.
I think in relation to what you just said, I think it's important to also talk about the half-life of caffeine, so that people know, and that's really why it's recommended to not drink caffeine too late in the day. I guess depending on your schedule, assuming that you have like a regular schedule where you're trying to go to bed at a decent time during the night. Of course, if you're up all night, that all changes. But so caffeine is supposed to have a between like a 3.5 to 5 hour half-life, which means that about 3.5 to 5 hours after you consume the caffeine, half of that's going to be gone, and then the next 5 hours. So potentially, depending on how much caffeine you're drinking, you could be up to 24 hours after you consume that, and you could still have traces of caffeine in your blood. So always something to think about. I did another learning with human kinetics specifically on caffeine, so I feel like I'm plugging that a lot, but there is a lot of really good information in that, and I do go much more in depth on caffeine dosage, exactly how caffeine affects performance, how it's going to affect you individually, and a lot more information about that. So again, check out my learning with human kinetics on caffeine. It's on YouTube. It should still be on the Instagram page here too. So with that said, we'll go ahead and move along. And I think one of the big ones that I think is getting a lot more popular, that a lot more people are catching on to, is creatine. And I know that you have had, you've done a lot more studying on this than I have for sure. but I mean, I could offer like anecdotal experiences and things like that. But what's the biggest, I guess, nugget of information that you have about creatine and, you know, its effects, like the dosage that people should take?
Oh man.
Yeah.
Question, dude. I guess usually where I start off with creatine, it's much like protein, is that people don't really know what it is. Like it's just kind of like thrown into camps that it's just not, it shouldn't be a part of. And the biggest thing to understand is that creatine is a naturally occurring substance that we make in our body naturally, and it's also in our food supply. So like if you eat meat and eat meat, you are consuming dietary creatine. Now, to get a dosage from food is next to impossible. And we'll maybe talk about that in a little bit, but it's something your body produces naturally already. It's in almost every cell in your body, if not every cell in your body. And the substance is a combination of kind of like 3 amino acids. And that's like the first point of confusion, is that a lot of people like think it's some type of steroid hormone into it, and it's not even close. Not even close. Okay. And first misconception that it's like an anabolic in some way, shape, or form. And that's not the case. Its role in the body is just to provide a quick energy. So you mentioned ATP earlier. You talked about adenosine. You know, we know that for every time you contract a muscle, that we are going to utilize ATP. It gets converted to ADP because that phosphate group gets taken off. Creatine just comes along and is like, here's a phosphate for ADP, gives it a phosphate, and now we're back to ATP in one step really quickly. And that's what process we need to happen when we are doing things of a high intensity, like sprinting, lifting, jumping, and things like that. Creatine is the provider of that energy, a provider of the recycling of ATP. We know that if we supplement with creatine, if we add creatine to the diet, we can elevate the amount of creatine in our muscle. That allows us to do those things like sprint, jump, lift heavy weight, lift explosively for a longer period of time. And because of that, you now can be faster, be stronger, be faster, you know, repeatedly, if we're thinking like repeated sprints. So yeah, those are like I guess where I really like start with creatine is like, do you know what it is? Do you know what it does?
I think that's interesting. If I think back, I don't know. I mean, we can go back to, well, I guess Mark McGwire's Sammy Sosa home run thing isn't the best because we did find out that they were using steroids. But before that, I mean, it was the assumption that they were, you know, taking creatine, and everyone at that time, I mean, this was what, late 90s, early 2000s. People thought that creatine was this taboo thing that like nobody should be taking, and you were cheating in your sport or in life, whatever. If you were in life, right?
Yeah.
Just by taking creatine. And it's just kind of funny. I mean, I know, like, you know, college sports coaches were saying, no, don't take creatine. We don't want to get in trouble. And it's just interesting, like over time, it's kind of like it went from that perspective of creatine to now, you know, sports dietitians are saying, you know, everyone should be taking creatine, you know, like it has so many benefits, not just in terms of performance, but, and I don't know if you want to touch on some of this, you don't have to, but like I've also read a lot of like cognitive benefits and just so many more benefits that creatine can offer, in addition to performance related benefits. So I just think it's interesting, you know, the general misconception of it has kind of transitioned into this whole idea that, and the truth that, you know, creatine is a good supplement to take and you can get a lot of benefits. It's not bad. Like you said, like it's not a steroid or anything like that. It's just another supplement for whatever reason that got a bad rap early on. And now I think people are finally catching on to it.
Yeah. What happened was creatine just got linked to a lot of case studies, case reports, situations where the people just happened to be taking creatine, but the issue was really something else. Right. Wrestlers that were dehydrated, underfueled, working out in super hot environments. Yeah, that's not good. Something's bad to happen. Oh, but there was also creatine. Oh, the creatine's the problem, not the hydrated under fueled and working out in 100-degree heat. So that's really what happened. And then, as far as like why we've kind of seen this surge is that people just finally started looking at the research and being like, well, if all these bad things happen, why do we have over 1,000 studies on it? Why, if these things are really occurring, you wouldn't be studying it anymore. Nobody would give creatine to Division I athletes, or nobody would agree to be studies because they're like, well, I don't want to get muscle cramps. I don't want to get dehydrated. And what's really funny about creatine is a lot of the bad things associated with it, muscle cramping, dehydration, things like that. Most of the research supports that it has the opposite effect of being those things. So it's just interesting. And, we always have to constantly get good information out there. So, that's kind of where the path of creatine. And to your point about cognitive benefits, that's really where the research has shifted. We just kind of know what it is from a performance standpoint. We know what it does. But again, since creatine is in every cell in the body, well, if we take creatine, it also increases the creatine content in those cells. So like brain cells, if we increase the creatine content, we're giving cells another source of energy it can use without oxygen. When we have things like concussion, that's important.
Yeah, I actually had an athlete come in. This was last week. And he actually asked that question, probably because he had heard from, some kids at school, maybe in a high school that's linked to his middle school. And he asked about creatine, and he said, he actually asked that. He said, so is creatine like a steroid? And I thought, okay, so he's heard from someone else, like he's read something, maybe he saw something on TikTok or whatever, like misinformation. I don't want to demonize social media. I think, whether it's TikTok or whatever platform, I think maybe those get a bad rap sometimes, but there is a lot of really good information that you can find on there too. So he specifically asked about it and if creatine was bad. And I said, no, like it's actually in your body right now. Like you have creatine in your body without even taking it as a supplement. And of course I didn't want to get too sciencey on him. And so I did my best to explain. Also, not necessarily encouraging him as a 7th grader who probably just needs to eat more in general, get better sleep, that type of thing. But yeah, it's just interesting. Like you hear those questions from all different populations of people that are just getting more interested in it now and just trying to figure out what the benefits are, just because they hear from so many different sources.
Yeah. So, before we move on, let's talk dosage, just so people.
Yep.
Like they're hearing this, like, oh man, maybe I should do it. Let's at least make sure that people do know how to take it.
Right.
So you've probably heard creatine. You've probably heard about a loading phase with creatine, and the reason people would load is because you can like max out your stores in muscle if you take a higher dose for a few days. So classically, this is like 20 to 25 grams for about 5 days. I'm more of a fan of doing a recommendation on body weight, because if you are a 7th grader and you happen to be taking creatine and you're 30 soaking wet,
right,
25 grams is a much higher dose than if you or I took it and we're like around 200 pounds.
Right.
So I'm much more of a fan of a body weight base. So for loading, that would be 0.3 grams per kilogram. All right. 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight is a good loading. And you do that for 5 days, split the dose up into, 2 to 4 doses, and then you're good. You're topped off, you're maxed out. Anything more than that, not really going to benefit. And then to maintain that, you shift that back to 0.03 grams per kilogram. Most people, that's going to be around 5 grams a day, 3 to 5 grams a day. Now, that's if you want it to start working within a week. Most people are like, I just want it for other benefits that we've talked about. Then you go to 5 to 10 grams a day, the 0.03 grams per kilogram, and you're going to get to the same spot in about a month.
Yeah. All right. Something else I think we should touch on too. You briefly mentioned in one of those anecdotes, about dehydration. I know that is kind of a side effect that I've experienced before. That I know some other people have. What can you speak to on that? About I think it happens most when someone starts taking it for the first time. Maybe they're not drinking enough water with it. Maybe something else is going on. Is there any truth to that, or maybe I just wasn't drinking enough water in general?
Truth to to creatine being dehydrating?
Right.
No, it's actually the opposite.
Okay. Yeah.
In studies that looked at things like cell hydration,
right,
tolerance, and things like that, the creatine groups do better.
Yeah.
So again, these got tied to some anecdotal thing where, again, athletes are dehydrated, working out in hot environments, maybe taking other things they shouldn't be taking,
right,
creatine, but everything we have suggests that creatine is not dehydrating, and it actually has a benefit to hydration. Yeah. When I was a coach and my athletes would come to me and, you think about football camp in August, they're out there, they're practicing 3 to 4 to 5 hours a day. I'm like, honestly, if you take, I would load creatine in July. That way you'll be better able to tolerate the heat, and you're better protected from concussions. So
right.
The evidence does not support or show that creatine is dehydrating.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't drink less water, or be less, but at the same time, it seems to have the opposite effect.
Yeah. All right. Good point there. Like I said, we can go ahead and move on. I know there were a couple more that you wanted to touch on.
Let's do beta-alanine.
Okay. Yep.
Finish up here just because we're already at 40 minutes. But
yeah.
So the other one I wanted to discuss, because again, the theme of this is popular supplements. These are things that get recommended. So when we're talking about supplements that are kind of seen as effective, they're more common, creatine, protein, caffeine, and another one that's in there a lot is beta-alanine. All right.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot of similarities here with creatine, and the fact that beta-alanine is a naturally occurring substance. You eat it in your food, but you can't eat enough of these food sources of beta-alanine to actually get any kind of effect on performance. So creatine, affects this very quick phosphagen or ATP PC system, energy system for creating ATP. Beta-alanine works on the next one down the chain, if a lot of people kind of think of it that way, in the glycolytic system that creates more ATP. So we know that when you're doing things that are a little bit longer in duration, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, and that's constant, or higher rep training, 12 reps, 15 reps, you're going to get this burning sensation.
Right.
That is what's happening, is that the muscle cells becoming more acidic due to the increase of hydrogen ions. Beta-alanine, when you consume it, forms this compound called carnosine, and carnosine will actually buffer those hydrogen ions and prevent them from accumulating so fast.
Right.
So that burning effect is delayed. So then you can take creatine, you can do the thing for longer. You can sprint. If you're an 800-meter runner or a 400-meter runner, you can maintain a higher velocity for longer. If you're a bodybuilder, you can use more weight at a higher rep range, because that sensation isn't as much of an issue. If you're a CrossFitter, for doing high intensity interval training, you can, again, maintain a higher intensity when you typically would be more fatigued. Okay. So
right.
That with beta-alanine, if you're not doing things like CrossFit, high rep training, high intensity interval training, things like that will cause that burning sensation, you're really not getting an effect from beta-alanine.
Okay.
So if you're like a power lifter and you're staying in anything above 5 reps is cardio, and you just go, you're probably not getting much. It's not really worth taking beta-alanine. Right. Flip side, if you're very, very on the endurance end of the spectrum, and you just kind of stay within these ranges of activity where you can really maintain it for a long period of time, again, you're probably not going to get much use from beta-alanine because you're not tapping into the energy system, or you're not working intensely enough to create the hydrogen ions.
Right.
Very, like, you know, again, it's thrown in this camp of things that work, but it's very conditional. You've got to train the right way, and you've got to have the right activity for it.
Yeah. So I think that's one where, yeah, you do have to be very specific in your need for beta-alanine. You have to be very specific in, you know, whatever sport or activity you're doing. Otherwise, I mean, essentially you could just be, you know, if you're buying this as a supplement, I mean, you could be wasting your money, you could be wasting your time, like just taking a supplement that you don't need at all. And I think that's one of the points that we wanted to get across in this whole discussion. You know, supplements could be good in certain situations, but you want to be careful, like what supplements you're taking, the reasons that you're taking them, and just be kind of aware of, you know, what you're putting in your body, making sure that you're getting the right dosage of, you know, whether that is the beta-alanine, caffeine, creatine, you know, protein, if you're not getting enough from your regular diet every day. So that was kind of our whole intent today, just to kind of talk about some of those more popular supplements, kind of hopefully educate everyone a little more on those supplements, you know, things that people are probably already taking or interested in taking anyway. So if you don't have anything else, Corey?
Before we hop off, I do want to touch on beta-alanine dosage.
Okay.
Just so
good call.
So beta-alanine dosage, the most common recommended is 4 to 6 grams a day.
Okay.
Way higher than most people like take or what you'll see in a product.
Okay.
4 to 6 a day, split up into multiple doses. Here's the thing. It takes 4 weeks for it to build up to the point to where you see benefits. That's another thing with beta-alanine. Creatine, if you load it, it's 5 days. Beta-alanine, you know, take the 6 grams versus the 4 grams, whatever, it's still a month. You can't really.
Okay.
So that's the other thing. It's like, all right, you basically have to take an entire bottle if it's a 1 month supply for a whole month, and then you have to buy a second one to really kind of get to see the effects.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's the cost benefit ratio here?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the other thing is you'll see beta-alanine in almost every single pre-workout product because we know it has this like anti-fatigue, endurance enhancement, you know, effect. And so one side effect of beta-alanine is this tingling. Yeah. You'll get tingling in the hands, the face, or some people experience it in other areas. And that's where like people are like, oh boy, here we go.
Right.
And like most of the time, I mean, the highest dose I've seen in a pre-workout of beta-alanine is like 3.5 grams. Mm-hmm. Definitely give you that tingling feeling. Most have way less than that. But here's the problem. Even if it's higher, it does not have an acute effect. Like I said, it takes 4 weeks to build.
Right.
It's not I take it and then it helps me. It's I take it for a month, I get my muscle levels elevated, and then it starts to help me.
Okay.
You'll see it in pre-workouts. You'll see it. We've got beta-alanine. It does this, but taking that 4 to 6 grams a day for a month, it's not really helping you other than making your skin tingle. And if you like it, cool. But it's not helping you on the short term.
Right. That made me think of a story. I had a friend in college. So after this one class, we knew that, I don't know, I can mention him by name. We knew that Tyler was going to, you know, go get in his workout, get in his lift right after this class. Yeah. So we're sitting there in class, and like he took his pre-workout, and we intentionally stood there and talked to him until he started feeling that tingly feeling. And he would get so irritated at us sometimes. Like, yeah, we waited for you know, visual cues that was starting to kick in, and we might have been kind of bad about it, like just doing it on purpose just to see what his reaction might be and to kind of see him start like rubbing his skin and everything. But but to your point then, if say you are a track athlete wanting to take beta-alanine, if that's going to help improve your performance for your specific event, then you're saying for like a spring track season, you're going to probably start taking that in like January, maybe even December, so that you can get the effects once spring hits. So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good to know. So yeah, we do thank everyone that has been hanging on, listening to us talk about this for about 45 minutes or so. It has been a little bit of time, but we do appreciate you listening. Hopefully you got something out of this. Like I said, for some of those topics, you know, caffeine, protein, you know, I even touched on creatine a little bit in some of my other Learning with Human Kinetics episodes. You can find those on YouTube for more information. Yeah, again, maybe you can find that video, you know, in the Instagram timeline there too. So again, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you are joining us again, you know, for our next trainer talk sometime next month.